Level 1, the applicant. You are 29 years old. You have a master's degree in mechanical engineering, 1,400 flight hours as a test pilot, and a resting heart rate your flight surgeon calls annoyingly perfect. You submit your application to the Astronaut Corps on the last day of the open call. So does almost everyone else who has ever dreamed about this. 18,300 people apply this cycle. You are one of them. You know the odds before you click submit. You click submit anyway. The first cut happens by email. No phone call, no ceremony, just a subject line that either says congratulations or says nothing at all because you never hear back. 18,300 becomes 600 in the first round. You make it. You don't celebrate. You've been rejected by things you were more qualified for than this. The interviews take 4 days. Psychologists ask you to describe your worst failure in front of strangers. A flight surgeon draws more blood than you've given in your entire life. You run on a treadmill wired to sensors while a panel of astronauts you've watched on television since childhood takes notes on a clipboard you can't read upside down. You are asked to spend 2 hours alone in a small white room with no windows and no task. They are watching how you sit with nothing. You didn't know that was a skill until you realized you were being tested on it. 600 becomes 120. 120 becomes 50. You get the call at 6:47 in the morning. Your hands are shaking before you answer. 10 people from this cycle make the cut. You are one of them. You hang up the phone and sit on the kitchen floor for 11 minutes before you tell anyone. You need that time to believe it's real. Somewhere in this country right now, 18,290 people are opening an email that says something else. Level 2, the candidate. They don't call you an astronaut yet. You are an ASCIN, an astronaut candidate, and the acronym itself is a small, deliberate humiliation. You haven't earned the title. You have to survive 2 years to earn it, and survival is not guaranteed. You move to Houston. You learn Russian 4 hours a week because half your career, if you have one, will happen on a spacecraft built by people who don't speak your language, and every manual you'll ever read will exist in 2 alphabets. You fail your first vocabulary quiz. You are 29 years old, and you fail a quiz like it's 9th grade all over again. You train in the neutral buoyancy lab, a pool 6 stories deep with a full-scale mock-up of the space station sitting at the bottom of it. You spend 6 hours in a 300-pound suit simulating weightlessness, and by hour 4 your hands are cramping so badly inside the gloves that you can't feel your own fingers. This is considered a good day. A bad day is when the suit's cooling system lags and you overheat inside your own equipment while a safety diver watches your vitals through a faceplate you can't wipe clean. You fly the T-38 jet trainer for the first time as a mission specialist instead of a pilot, which means you are not flying it. You are trusting someone else to fly it while you learn to function under G-forces that press your organs somewhere they don't belong. You throw up on your 3rd flight. Your instructor doesn't mention it. Everyone throws up on their 3rd flight. Nobody mentions it for anyone. You learn geology in the desert, robotics in a lab, orbital mechanics in a classroom, and survival training in the wilderness with a survival kit and a radio you're told not to use unless you mean it. You are graded on all of it. There is no tenure here. 2 years in, some candidates from your class are quietly reassigned to ground positions and never fly. Nobody announces why. You learn not to ask. Level 3, the technical assignment. You survive the 2 years. You are an astronaut now, technically, officially, on paper. You get a pin. The pin does not get you a flight. This is the part nobody explains at the interview. You can complete every requirement, pass every test, earn every certification, and still sit in Houston for years before your name gets attached to a mission. The average wait between selection and first flight is longer than most marriages last before their first fight about money. Some of your classmates fly within 3 years. Others wait 8. 1 or 2, quietly, never fly at all, and eventually leave the agency for private industry, and nobody talks about them at the holiday party. You get assigned to mission control as a Capcom, the one voice from the ground that astronauts in orbit are allowed to hear. You spend your days learning every system on a spacecraft you are not currently flying, so that if something breaks 250 miles above the Earth, you can talk someone else through fixing it in a voice that does not shake. You practice for disasters that mostly never happen. You practice anyway, because the ones that do happen don't give you a second try. Your marriage absorbs the strain differently than you expected. It's not the danger that wears on your spouse. It's the waiting. The unpredictability of a career built entirely around a phone call that might come this year or might come never. You miss your nephew's graduation for a training exercise that gets canceled the day after you miss it. Nobody apologizes. Nobody owes you one. This is the job you asked for. Level 4, the assignment. The call comes on a Tuesday. You are named to a crew. 18 months until launch. Training accelerates into something that consumes your entire life on purpose. Simulators run failure scenarios designed by engineers whose job is to imagine the worst version of every system breaking simultaneously. You practice depressurization. You practice fire. You practice a computer failure during reentry that requires you to fly a spacecraft manually using math you memorized and hope you never have to use. Your crew becomes the 6 people you trust with your life before you trust almost anyone else with anything. You sign your will. This is not dramatic language. It is a checklist item, sandwiched between a dental exam and a media training session. You designate who speaks for your children if you don't come home. You do this at your kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon while your kids watch cartoons in the next room, and then you close the laptop and make them lunch. Quarantine begins 2 weeks before launch. You are isolated from anyone who might carry an illness onto the spacecraft, including, eventually, your own family, who you see through glass for your final visit before launch day. Your daughter presses her hand against the window. You press yours against the other side. The glass doesn't move. Neither of you pretends it isn't strange. Level 5, the launch. This is the part where the math stops being theoretical. You are strapped into a seat designed for the human body under conditions the human body did not evolve for. The vehicle beneath you contains several million pounds of propellant, and your entire training exists to prepare you for the version of this where something in that fuel system doesn't behave the way the engineers promised it would. The countdown reaches 0. It always sounds calmer on the radio than it feels in the seat. For the first 8.5 minutes, your body experiences forces that push your organs against your spine and squeeze the breath out of your lungs in a way no simulator fully replicates. At 2 minutes and 4 seconds, a sensor flags an unexpected pressure reading in one of the boosters. It is inside the range engineers call acceptable. It is also the exact kind of anomaly that, in a different vehicle on a different day, ended differently for other crews before you. You know the history. Everyone in this seat knows the history. Nobody says it out loud during ascent, because saying it out loud does not help, and your voice needs to sound like it belongs to someone who isn't thinking about it. Main engine cutoff hits at 8 minutes and 40 seconds. The vibration stops so suddenly it feels like the vehicle broke instead of succeeded. Your arms float up off the armrest before your brain catches up to what that means. You are in orbit. You are alive. Somewhere in Houston, a room full of people who have practiced this exact moment for years exhale at the same time, and none of them will ever fully describe that sound to anyone who wasn't in the room. Level 6, life aboard the station. The station orbits the Earth every 90 minutes, which means you watch a sunrise and a sunset 16 times in a single day, and by day 40 the human brain still hasn't figured out what to do with that information. Your circadian rhythm breaks in the first week and never fully repairs itself for the length of the mission. You lose bone density every month you're up here, roughly 1 to 2% at a rate your body would take years to lose on Earth. You exercise 2.5 hours a day to slow it, strapped to machines that fight your own weightlessness just to keep your muscles remembering what gravity felt like. Your face swells. Fluid that used to settle in your legs now floats toward your head, and the crew calls it moon face, with the specific, tired humor of people who have to live inside their own changing bodies for months at a time. You talk to your children through a video delay measured in seconds that feel longer than seconds should. Your daughter tells you about a school project. You ask a follow-up question. It arrives 4 seconds after she's already moved on to something else. This is what distance actually costs. Not the absence, the timing. An ammonia alarm goes off during your 3rd month. It turns out to be a faulty sensor. You don't know that for the 11 minutes it takes to confirm it. 11 minutes where you and your crew move through an emergency procedure you've practiced dozens of times on the ground and are now executing for real, masks on, hearts elevated, voices flat and procedural because panic doesn't fit inside a checklist. Level 7, the spacewalk. You suit up for your first EVA in a process that takes longer than most people's workday, pre-breathing pure oxygen for hours to purge nitrogen from your blood, because doing this wrong gives you the bins 250 miles from the nearest hospital. The suit itself is a spacecraft. It has its own life support, its own pressure, its own entire list of ways it can fail. You step outside. There is no sound. There is no atmosphere between your gloves and the void. Only a thin layer of fabric and engineering standing between you and something that would kill you in under 2 minutes if it failed completely. You are tethered, but the tether is a backup, not a plan. The plan is that nothing goes wrong. You have trained for 6 years to make sure that plan holds. You work for 6 hours replacing a component the size of a refrigerator, torquing bolts with hands inside gloves so pressurized that gripping anything for that long leaves your forearms shaking by hour 4. At one point, a small amount of water pools inside your helmet near your face, a known failure mode from a mission years before yours, one every astronaut studies before their first walk, one that ended in a crewmate nearly drowning inside his own suit in the vacuum of space. You feel it against your cheek. You finish the task anyway, because coming back inside early means someone else has to finish what you started in the same suit, with the same risk. Level 8, the failure. 6 months into the mission, a warning klaxon you've heard only in simulators sounds for real. A fire alarm in one of the modules. In a sealed metal environment with a fixed, finite amount of breathable air, fire is not an inconvenience. It is one of the small number of things that can end everything in minutes. You move to your assigned station without discussing it, because discussing it wastes the seconds you don't have. Your crew pulls on masks, seals the module, and begins the fire suppression sequence you have rehearsed so many times your hands know it faster than your conscious mind can follow. It turns out to be an electrical short behind a panel, contained and extinguished in under 4 minutes. For minutes that will sit in your body for the rest of the mission, showing up at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and your mind replays it anyway. Ground control debriefs the incident for 6 hours. Somewhere in Houston, an engineer who has never left Earth is already redesigning the panel that started it for the next crew, the one who will never know how close this came to being a different kind of story. That is the job beneath the job. The version of this work that never gets a headline, done by people whose names you'll never learn, closing the gaps that almost got you. Level 9, the commander. Your second mission, years later, you're not a crew member anymore. You're the commander. 6 people from 4 different countries, speaking 3 different first languages, and their survival for the next 7 months runs through decisions you make. You are responsible for a Russian cosmonaut, a Japanese mission specialist, and a European astronaut on her first flight, along with 2 Americans who have flown before and 1 who hasn't. You mediate a disagreement between agencies about a science experiment's priority that has nothing to do with science and everything to do with funding politics happening in rooms you'll never sit in. You learn that command in space is 10% technical decision-making and 90% managing 6 exhausted humans living in a space smaller than most people's apartments, for months, without the ability to leave. Your youngest crew member struggles in month 5. Not physically. The isolation gets to people differently, at different times, and you recognize the signs because you've lived through your own version of them on a previous flight. You give her a task that isn't strictly necessary, because sometimes the job itself is the medicine. She doesn't know you did it on purpose. That's the point. You are 47 years old. Your daughter, the one who pressed her hand against quarantine glass when she was 7, is filling out her own college application. She wants to study aerospace engineering. You didn't push her toward it. You also never once discouraged it, and you know the difference matters. Level 10, the legacy. You retire from active flight status at 54. 2 missions, 311 days in space, for spacewalks, and a body that will carry the bone density loss and the vision changes for the rest of your life, whether anyone ever notices or not. Which means you now sit on the other side of the table in that small white room with no windows and no task, watching how the applicants across from you sit with nothing. You recognize the ones who are performing calm. You recognize the ones who actually have it. You were both of those people at different points, and you no longer remember exactly when one became the other. Your daughter gets accepted into the Astronaut candidate program herself, 9 years after you retired. 21,000 people applied this cycle. She is one of 9 selected. You are in the audience when they announce it, and you don't cry, because you trained for decades to control your face under pressure, and this turns out to be a kind of pressure nobody prepared you for. Somewhere tonight, a 29-year-old engineer with 1,400 flight hours is filling out an application at a kitchen table, hitting submit on a form that will get read alongside 18,000 others just like it. They have no idea what the room with no windows will ask of them. They have no idea what 6 hours in a pressurized glove does to a forearm, or what 4 seconds of delay does to a conversation with a child, or what a klaxon sounds like when it is in a drill. They know only that they want this more than almost anything, the same way you did, the same way everyone before you did. They'll find out. They always do. The cycle continues.